my name is Paige Greenwood, and I am a postdoctoral research fellow at Columbia University.
Hi, my name is Ketema Paul. I am a professor of integrative biology and physiology at University of California, Los Angeles, and also a professor of psychiatry at University of California, Los Angeles.
So going into the first question, what does your neuroscience research currently focus on, and how did you get into it?
My neuroscience research currently focuses on sleep regulatory mechanisms. These are mechanisms in the brain that are responsible for regulating the sleep-wake cycle in your sleep patterns. I got into it via circuitous route. I actually first started studying vision when I was an undergraduate at Howard University. And then when I went to graduate school at Georgia State University, I used my background in vision to begin studying circadian rhythms, which uses visual pathways. And then after I got my PhD, when I went to my postdoc, I continued to study rhythms, but I studied the sleep-wake cycle, which is a primary circadian rhythm. And from there, I just went into the study of sleep. So it started in neuroscience with the study of vision, and really just being driven by the results of all the experiments we were doing led me to study sleep and sleep regulation.
So you mentioned you went to Howard University. I won't shun you and do the HU versus HU battle. We appreciate all HBCUs, but I want to know more about your academic journey there. What was it like being an undergraduate student at Howard University?
Well, I was an undergraduate student, and I graduated with a degree in biology. Although when I matriculated there, which I don't want to date myself too much, but it was the early 90s, the department was zoology. It became the biology department during my senior year. But I started researching fireflies, visual pathways of fireflies. I knew I wanted to be a biomedical researcher, and I kind of already knew I wanted to do neuroscience. The zoology program at the time at Howard, which morphed into the biology program, was very rigorous. It was a really tough program. So the first part was being able to pass my courses and get good grades in my courses. And from that point, I just got really lucky. A position opened up in the lab, and I was able to apply and got the position. And it was in a neurophysiology lab in Just Hall on Howard's campus. And from there, I began doing research as an undergraduate in my third year at Howard, looking at visual pathways in fireflies.
Wow, that sounds like a really incredible journey. And it also sounds like you really had some amazing mentors along your path. So how was going to an HBCU in regards to mentorship, and how has it influenced your mentorship style today as a PI?
Wow. So I did have some really good mentors at Howard. I had good instructors, primarily really good instructors, rigorous instructors, and hard instructors. The one of the things about going to Howard and HBCUs in general is you don't get any passes. My coursework was extremely difficult, and there weren't any exceptions made for anyone. There wasn't any grade inflation. There wasn't any screening out of people whom faculty thought may be successful versus, or screening out of students who faculty thought may be successful versus students who weren't. You just had to do well, and if you didn't, you had to find something else. So that was the first thing I would say was the rigor. The second thing was just this is something I've found common among HBCUs, and that is an appreciation for cultural background. That's something that I got at Howard, was kind of an understanding that, for people in the majority, the cultural context is kind of integrated into what they're learning. But at Howard, it was important for me, and my mentors taught me how it's important to at least recognize the cultural context of the trainees and the students, and try to access that in encouraging trainees to be excellent. That's something my mentors did for me. The most important thing, however, was for me was the, kind of being in a place that a biology department in which one of my heroes, Ernest Everett Just, was a faculty member. The building where the zoology program at the time was housed was Just Hall. I knew that. I'm from Washington, D.C., so I knew I had been on the campus many times, and he just became a hero of mine. So there's a biography written about Dr. Just called Black Apollo of Science. I had read it when I was at Howard, and I still recommend it to all of my trainees, whether they're African American or not, because I think that the journey that is described in that book, Black Apollo of Science, really encapsulates the resilience necessary if you're coming from an HBCU and you're coming from an African American background. That book really describes the resilience that is going to take and that it takes to have achievement in the field of neuroscience, and I think in biomedicine in general. So I would say from a mentoring perspective, the rigor at Howard, the attention to cultural context, and the having an icon like Ernest Everett Just, who had some of his major achievements as a faculty member at Howard, has, I think, a really good biography about him. It just provides an additional tool that I use when I'm mentoring students.
Yeah, I think you touched on so many incredible points right there, like how cultural identity plays a big role in experiences at HBCUs. I think, we really start to tap into being so proud of who we are, our roots, and the resilience of our people. But also, you get this very rigorous curriculum in place because the professors care so much about you. If you're slacking off, they know it because they're staying on top of the students. If there's not a research experience that they can give you on the campus, they'll find a way to get you one somewhere else. You really just tied all those parts together so beautifully with, how important HBCUs are for our community, but also for everybody else too. So the hidden curriculum refers to unwritten rules that are unofficial and often unintended lessons, values, or perspectives that students learn in school. When entering your PWI, what were some of the unwritten rules that weren't so clear to you?
Build strong relationships among your peer group. Oftentimes, if you're coming into an environment that's unfamiliar to you and that is somewhat intimidating, you will get the impression that if you can impress the people that are higher up, or if you can build strong relationships with the leaders or the people who are kind of above you, that will ease your transition. But I found that the best operating strategy in the field of neuroscience and in biomedical research in general is to build strong relationships with your peers. So that means if you're an undergraduate with other undergraduates, if you're a graduate student with other graduate students, if you're a postdoc with other postdocs in science, and those are the relationships that are going to be the most sustaining for you. Those are the relationships that are going to open the most doors for you. And those are the people who you're going to be able to rely upon the most. Science is a peer-driven field. It's peer reviewed. It's peer driven, quite frankly. And so that means that those peers that you make along your journey, make sure those relationships are as authentic as possible, and make sure those relationships are infused with as much integrity as possible. Those are the relationships I think that are going to be most important. That's definitely an unwritten rule. I was fortunate enough that my graduate school advisor told me that explicitly. I know that there are a lot of trainees that don't get told that explicitly, but you build very strong relationships with your peer group.
Yeah, I think when we think about building relationships, we're always thinking about folks that are so much farther ahead of us because we're thinking about like, oh, they're already where I want to be, or they can help me get to where I want to go, without even thinking about how sometimes those peer relationships, those are the folks that are on the ground, boots on the ground, sending you the opportunities that are out there. For me, having conversations with folks about my interest in science policy, a lot of my peers have sent me opportunities just off of remembering those little things. So I definitely agree with that. So what's something that you would tell someone beginning their Black journey to neuro?
Wow. So if you're just starting out, I'd say have really well-defined goals, learn as much as you can about what you're getting into,
Yeah.
and then set some really well-defined goals and set a well-defined path toward getting there. I'm a big fan of the 5-year plan. I try to encourage all my trainees. Most of the trainees in my lab have an individual development plan, and I usually base it on 5-year plans with periodic goals, a goal at the end of every year, and then goals within those years. I think a lot of the resistance to do that is people may not be sure about what they want to do. And to me, that's the best reason to have well-defined goals, because if you have a well-defined goal and you begin moving toward it, then you learn about what it is you're doing, and that gives you a lot more information about the decisions you want to make. The best thing about well-defined goals is you can always change them, right? If you don't have a very well-defined goal, then it makes it, I think, more difficult to navigate. But if you have a very well-defined goal and you're moving toward that goal, you're learning about what it takes to get to that goal, then you can make a lot better informed decisions. And for those who are already on the journey, I say appreciate the process. Appreciate the process, respect the process. One of my mentors, Dr. Peter McLeish at Morehouse School of Medicine, that was something that he taught me very fundamentally, is that you got to appreciate and respect the process. It's hard. You have to appreciate that, because if something you really want, if it was easy, it wouldn't have much value to you. So you gotta recognize that all the times you get knocked down, get back up and get knocked down and get back up, that is what it's going to take to get you where you need to go. And failure, you gotta learn to appreciate failure. I always like to say failure is the most assured path to success, right? And I use myself to measure. If I'm successful in everything, then I'm not really pushing myself, right? If you're really pushing yourself, if you're really stressing your limits, then you're going to fail. You're going to fall down, and you just have to keep getting back up. And I think over my journey, I've learned to actually appreciate that. We tend to look backwards and appreciate the times that we fell down and picked ourselves back up. I think the trick is to learn how to appreciate that in real time,
Yeah.
as it's happening. And if you can do that, I think that relieves a lot of the stress and anxiety associated with the process.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. This has been super informative, and you've given us so many gems from this conversation. So we're super appreciative. I do want to give you an opportunity to say any final words or closing words.
Wow. Just I really appreciate the theme of HBCUs for this interview. I think historically black colleges and universities, uh, the history of HBCUs in general is very important, not just to our field and to neuroscience, but to the ability of this field to move forward. I know that HBCUs and their history have a lot to offer the field of neuroscience and have a lot to offer biomedical research in general. And and I also recognize that HBCUs are various. Every HBCU has its own unique gifts and has its own unique story and has its own unique value. So it's really important that as we move forward, we appreciate all of the HBCUs, not just the Howards and the Hamptons where I went to and that you went to, but also the smaller HBCUs that don't get as much merit. And I can name a bunch of them here, but I don't want to look like I'm choosing some over the other. But all of the HBCUs, I think that they all have unique stories. They all have unique strengths, and they all produce students that have, I think, a lot of promise and a lot of success. So I really appreciate what you're doing here, and I'm a big fan of HBCUs in general. And I think that what you're doing is going to help feels like mine really appreciate what students and trainees from HBCUs have to bring.
Absolutely. Yeah.